to use that as a guidebook for life. Now, this is crazy. Why was the Book of Enoch removed from the Bible?
The Book of Enoch, an ancient Jewish text attributed to Noah's great-grandfather, has captivated scholars and spiritual seekers for centuries because of its profound mystical content. Although it is not part of the canonical Bible, the book offers a fascinating glimpse into early Jewish beliefs about the divine and the supernatural. It also contains important clues about the evolution of early Jewish thought, the development of Christian doctrines, and the apocalyptic traditions that would later influence much of Western religious philosophy. The book has been discussed several times on the famous Joe Rogan Experience. One episode even explored how scientists finally opened the Book of Enoch and what happened afterward. There's a lot to unpack, so let's get straight to it. The Book of Enoch and the biblical tradition. First things first, let's make one thing clear. The Book of Enoch is anything but ordinary. Back in 2019, Joe Rogan and Graham Hancock, a researcher and author famous for investigating ancient civilizations and alternative histories, sat down together and explored the book's themes, particularly its apocalyptic visions and the fall of the Watchers or fallen angels. Rogan was right to point out how the Book of Enoch connects with the wider story of human history. But it's hard not to ask why the book was left out of the biblical canon, and what might have happened if it had been accepted as canon. We'll get to that soon enough, but first, let's gain some perspective. As mentioned earlier, the book is unusual. For example, it says that Watchers, a group of angelic beings who came down to Earth, married human women and fathered a hybrid race of giants called the Nephilim. According to the text, these beings corrupted humanity and revealed forbidden knowledge, including weapon-making, cosmetics, astrology, and sorcery. Even more mysterious is the detailed account of Enoch's celestial journey, in which he's carried into the heavens and shown the complex workings of creation, including strange portals that control natural phenomena. These ideas have caused some to wonder whether the Book of Enoch is a metaphor, an allegory, or a record of something far more extraordinary. Back in the 4th century AD, religious leaders from across Christendom debated which writings should be included in what we now know as the Bible. The decision began taking clearer shape at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD and continued through later councils such as Hippo in 393 AD and Carthage in 397 AD, which formalized the canon of the Old and New Testaments. These councils focused on unity and consistency in belief throughout the expanding Christian world. However, many writings, including the Book of Enoch, the Gospel of Thomas, and others, were eventually classified as apocryphal or such grail were left out. While the Book of Enoch encountered particular obstacles during canonization, its influence continued. Early Christian figures like Talion and Origen cited and respected the text, and it remained canonical within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, where it still holds an honored position today. More recent archaeological discoveries, including the Dead Sea Scrolls, have renewed interest in writings such as the Book of Enoch. These discoveries demonstrate that such texts were widely read and respected within certain Jewish communities before the time of Christ. Modern scholarship is now better prepared to investigate how and why writings like Enoch eventually lost favor. This may also allow us to uncover the political and cultural changes taking place within the early church. So, let's get straight back to it. How do the believers see the Book of Enoch? The Book of Enoch remains one of the most mysterious and debated writings in religious history, influencing both Judaism and Christianity while at the same time being rejected by mainstream traditions. It was especially important during the Second Temple period. We know this because it is strongly represented among the Dead Sea Scrolls, where several copies were found. Yet today, its canonical acceptance is restricted, notably preserved by the Beta Israel Jewish community of Ethiopia. This powerful influence, alongside widespread rejection, creates fascinating questions about its role in religious history. The Jewish rejection of Enoch was mainly theological. Rabbinic Judaism considered it incompatible with the teachings of the Torah, especially its apocalyptic stories and detailed angelology. For example, 1 Enoch 40 presents the angel Phanuel, who watches over repentance and eternal life. This conflicts with traditional Jewish teachings. the concept that angels could rebel against God and corrupt creation. As described extensively through the Watchers and their descendants, the Nephilim was viewed as coming close to blasphemy. Such concepts conflicted with Jewish monotheism, where divine authority was absolute and angels were simply messengers unable to morally stray. Furthermore, sections of Enoch seem to reuse or expand existing Torah material as shown in 1 Enoch 1, which draws extensively from Deuteronomy 33. This resulted in claims that it was derivative instead of divinely inspired. Despite this, its deep impact on Christianity cannot be denied. The Book of Enoch was initially accepted by early theologians, yet by the 5th century it had mostly disappeared from Christian canons, surviving primarily through the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition. This rejection arose from concerns similar to those found in Judaism, including its speculative cosmology, its vivid portrayal of fallen angels, and its potential to encourage heretical interpretations. The early church's hesitation to canonize Enoch likely came from worries about its apocalyptic intensity and speculative cosmology. Its stories, filled with visions of divine judgment and cosmic conflict, differed from the Christ-centered teachings of grace and redemption that the Church wanted to highlight. Modern discoveries such as the Dead Sea Scrolls offer fresh chances to reassess the Book of Enoch's historical and theological importance. Scholars have recognized its influence on apocalyptic writings and its contribution to the development of early Christian eschatology. Was its rejection simply an accident of history, or was it a deliberate effort to simplify doctrine? Perhaps the text's elaborate accounts of angelic rebellions and heavenly hierarchies simply created too many difficulties for the emerging orthodoxies of both Judaism and Christianity. As the scrolls reveal more about Second Temple Judaism, the Book of Enoch continues to spark debate, leaving us wondering what deeper truths could remain concealed within its cryptic verses. To understand things better, let's take a journey through history. The history of the Book of Enoch today. The Book of Enoch remains in fragments across several languages, with its most complete early manuscripts preserved in Ge'ez, the liturgical language of Ethiopia. These Ge'ez manuscripts are separated into two major families, classified by Robert Henry Charles in his 1906 edition. Family Alpha contains older, more faithful versions that closely match the earlier Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek versions, while Family Beta contains later edited texts. Important manuscripts from these families are preserved in prestigious libraries and collections, including the British Museum, the Bodleian Library, and the Vatican. These writings represent centuries of careful preservation and the geographical expansion of Enochic traditions. Outside the Ethiopic tradition, the Book of Enoch also appears in fragments written in Aramaic, Greek, Coptic, Latin, and Syriac. Aramaic fragments were discovered in Qumran's Cave 4 during the mid-20th century, while Greek passages remain in works such as the Chronographia Universalis and the Codex Panopolis. A rare Coptic fragment, a Latin excerpt, and a Syriac quotation in Michael the Great's Chronicle provide further evidence of the text's broad influence and adaptation across different linguistic and cultural settings. These surviving pieces, although incomplete, offer invaluable clues into the transmission and lasting importance of Enochic literature within ancient and medieval religious thought. So, what do we actually know about the history of this text? Well, for starters, the Book of Enoch is a composite work that reflects a constantly evolving blend of Jewish apocalyptic traditions developed over centuries. Ephraim Isaac, who edited and translated 1 Enoch for the Old Testament pseudepigrapha, argues that the text was produced by multiple authors across different periods, with its various sections dating from the early pre-Maccabean era, or around 200 BC, to roughly 160 AD. Likewise, George W.E. Nicholsburg describes it as a collection of Jewish apocalyptic traditions from the final 3 centuries BC. Paleographic studies of fragments found in the Qumran caves date the oldest sections, especially the Book of the Watchers, to between 200 and 150 BC, although the text itself may have originated as early as the 3rd century BC. The astronomical book appears to follow a similar timeline. Scholar David Jackson has proposed the existence of an Enochic Judaism, a distinctive branch of Jewish tradition that influenced the ideology of the Qumran community. Scholar Margaret Barker goes even further, arguing that the roots of this tradition reach back to the First Temple period. Enochic Judaism contains distinctive theological ideas about the origins of evil. This tradition maintains that angels who had relations with human women introduced evil into the world. This belief differs from the Mosaic Covenant, since Enochic writings leave out traditional Torah practices such as Sabbath observance and circumcision. A powerful focus on the end times and divine judgment takes priority over ideas of earthly rewards. Enochic Judaism also condemns the Second Temple's sacrificial system as impure, while portraying heaven as a divine court where angels act as courtiers. In addition, followers of this tradition prefer a solar calendar instead of the lunar calendar used in temple rituals and place strong emphasis on angelology and the afterlife. Creating a distinct theological framework that differs from mainstream Judaism. Classical rabbinic literature is remarkably silent about the figure of Enoch and the writings connected to him. This was likely the result of rabbinic opposition to Enochic traditions. Even so, the Book of Enoch remains highly important to the development of Jewish mysticism. Renowned scholar Gershom Scholem observed that the foundations of later Merkabah mysticism, which explores the mysterious visions of divine chariots in heavenly realms, are deeply connected to earlier esoteric traditions represented by the Book of Enoch. A key part of this connection appears in 1 Enoch 14, which offers a vivid and detailed vision of God's throne. This imagery had a profound impact on mystical thought. The influence of the Book of Enoch reaches beyond Judaism and into early Christian theology. This is especially clear in the New Testament's Epistle of Jude, which directly quotes the Book of Watchers, a section of 1 Enoch, highlighting themes of divine judgment and accountability for ungodliness. Furthermore, the book played a major role in shaping early Christian doctrines, especially ideas about the Messiah, the Son of Man, the Messianic Kingdom, demonology, resurrection, and eschatology. Early church fathers quoted the book both positively and critically. Figures like Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, and Origen referred to the text, while Byzantine scholars such as George Syncellus preserved excerpts. Even after being labeled apocryphal, the text's influence remained visible for centuries. However, as the centuries passed, the text nearly vanished. It was believed to be lost across much of the world outside Ethiopia until the 17th century, when reports began appearing about an Ethiopic version. Sir Walter Raleigh mentioned a story about a portion of Enoch being discovered in Sheba during the 1st century. The story gained further attention through James Bruce, a Scottish traveler who in 1773 returned to Europe with 3 copies of the Ge'ez text. These manuscripts were placed in major libraries and remained mostly unstudied until the 19th century, when scholars such as Richard Lawrence produced the first English translations. The translations and commentaries. R.H. Charles, during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, became a leading authority and reference point. The discovery of Aramaic fragments of 1 Enoch among the Dead Sea Scrolls in the 1950s marked another major breakthrough. This confirmed the text's ancient origins and revealed more about its original composition. In the decades that followed, interest surged again, with translations into various modern languages and detailed commentaries, including works by Michael Knibb and George W.E. Nicholsburg, adding depth to academic research. Scholars have also investigated the possibility that Enochic literature reflects an independent, non-Mosaic tradition within Second Temple Judaism, challenging traditional views about the development of Jewish theology. One thing, however, is certain. The Book of Enoch continues to hold lasting theological and literary importance. Its influence, although debated and complicated, remains stronger than ever. So, what exactly is inside the Book of Enoch? At its heart, the book focuses on the fall of the Watchers, or angels sent to earth to observe humanity, whose actions eventually corrupt both mankind and the heavens. Led by their chief angel Simjaza, the Watchers descend to earth and take human wives, resulting in the birth of the Nephilim, or giants, whose enormous size and hunger bring destruction upon the earth. Their arrival and actions disturb the divine order as they reveal forbidden knowledge to humanity, including metallurgy, sorcery, astrology, and cosmetics, all of which contribute to mankind's moral decline. The angels' rebellion leads to their punishment by God, who sends archangels such as Michael, Raphael, Uriel, and Gabriel to intervene, making sure that both the fallen angels and their monstrous offspring meet a terrible fate. The Book of the Watchers, which describes these events, also contains a striking account of Enoch's heavenly journeys, where he witnesses the divine judgment awaiting the fallen angels and their corrupted offspring. Enoch pleads with God for mercy on behalf of the fallen Watchers, yet the judgment remains absolute, and the angels' punishment is established. The Watchers are imprisoned, their knowledge declared a source of corruption, and their influence over humanity is cut off. The Nephilim, born from the forbidden union between angels and humans, are destroyed by divine intervention, with their spirits bound to the earth as punishment for their deeds. This portion of the text exposes the devastating consequences of the Watchers' rebellion, marking a crucial moment in biblical apocrypha. Through Enoch's vision, the celestial realm appears as a perfectly ordered world, where the stars, angels, and forces of nature function according to a divine plan. The stars, often interpreted as fallen angels, are placed in their rightful positions by God, who maintains the natural order. The story also refers to the destruction of the earth through an approaching flood, a prophecy that echoes the story of Noah and the Great Flood. God commands the archangel Uriel to warn Noah about the coming catastrophe, ensuring that Noah and his descendants survive as the cleansing floodwaters sweep away the world's wickedness. The text also presents the idea of a final judgment, in which the wicked will be destroyed while the righteous will receive their reward. This vision of the end times becomes a precursor to later Christian ideas about the apocalypse and divine punishment, making the Book of Enoch an essential text for understanding the development of apocalyptic literature and early Jewish thought. As scholars have pointed out, the Book of Enoch is not one unified work, but instead a collection of different traditions and writings brought together over time. Each of its 5 major sections reflects different themes and concerns, ranging from the fall of the Watchers to Enoch's journeys through the heavens and the revelation of divine mysteries about the structure of the universe. These writings, composed between the 4th and 3rd centuries BC, were probably independent works in the beginning, only later being edited together into the version of the Book of Enoch known today. Chapters 37 to 71 of the Book of Enoch, also known as the Book of Parables, represent a later stage in the narrative development of these ancient scriptures, building upon earlier writings such as the Book of the Watchers. While the Book of Parables shares many themes with the earlier work, it presents a more detailed and developed vision of eschatology and judgment. Most notably, it broadens the idea of final judgment, focusing not only on the fate of the fallen angels, but also on the destiny of corrupt earthly kings. At the heart of these parables is the figure of the Son of Man, a messianic figure also known as the Righteous One, the Chosen One, and the Messiah. This figure is portrayed sitting upon the throne of glory and presiding over the final judgment of the world. Most fascinating of all, scholars generally agree that this is the earliest known appearance of the title Son of Man in Jewish literature, appearing before its later and much broader use in Christian writings. Shocking, right? H. Charles, one of the early scholars of Enoch, interpreted this Son of Man figure as a supernatural being, a messianic judge of the world, possessing pre-existence and universal authority. According to Charles, this Son of Man sits on God's throne. This depiction of the Son of Man as a pre-existent divine figure with cosmic power has been viewed by some scholars as evidence of Christian redaction, especially because of its similarities to Christian theological ideas about the nature of Christ. However, not every scholar accepts this interpretation. Emil G. Hirsch, for instance, argues that the use of Son of Man in the Book of Parables does not necessarily indicate a supernatural Messiah, but instead reflects a wider apocalyptic tradition centered on divine judgment and the arrival of a righteous ruler. Furthermore, scholars such as Darrell D. Hanna propose that certain parts of the Book of Parables, particularly those concerning Noah and the judgment of the wicked, may represent later additions or modifications. These passages may have drawn from earlier traditions, especially Noah-centered apocryphal writings. Some of these sections appear to mention historical figures such as Herod the Great and are frequently dated to around 4 BC, making the dating of the text more complicated. In addition, chapters 70 to 71 are considered by many scholars to be later revisions because of changes in style and shifts in narrative perspective, moving from third person to first person. The Book of Parables itself is separated into 3 main parables, each concentrating on different elements of the eschatological vision. The first parable describes the coming judgment of the wicked and the eventual vindication of the righteous. It also introduces 4 archangels who hold important positions within the heavenly hierarchy. The second parable expands on the fate of the apostates and the renewal of the world through the creation of a new heaven and earth. This section also highlights the Son of Man's role in judging the kings and powerful rulers of the earth. The third parable centers on the righteous judgment of the kings, the fate of the fallen angels, and the ultimate cleansing of the world. This parable also foretells Noah's flood and the survival of Noah and his family. The final chapters present a concluding vision of Enoch's ascent into heaven and the 2 earlier visions that lead toward the ultimate judgment. These appendices emphasize Enoch's elevated status as the representative of the righteous and the mediator between the divine and human worlds. Overall, these complex layers, their focus on eschatology, and their deep exploration of justice and divine authority have made the text a vital piece of apocalyptic literature, influencing not only Jewish thought but also the development of early Christian theology. The Astronomical Book, another section of the Book of Enoch, provides a fascinating exploration of celestial mechanics, divine knowledge, and the structure of time. Discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran in the 20th century, fragments of this book are believed to date back to the 3rd century BC. These texts introduce a detailed calendar system, one that arranges the year into 364 days, divided into 4 seasons of 91 days each. Each season contains 3 months, each with 30 days, with 1 extra day added at the end of the 3rd month. This solar calendar was strictly followed by the Dead Sea sect and was significantly different from the lunar calendars used in Jerusalem, meaning the sect could not celebrate the same days as the temple in Jerusalem. The Astronomical Book connected the movements of heavenly bodies and the passage of time with divine purpose, making direct links to the creation account in Genesis. The calendar's accuracy is striking, with every year beginning on Wednesday, a symbolic day associated with the creation of the heavenly bodies, including the sun, moon, and stars. This was considered a sacred day, representing the divine order established at the beginning of creation. Scholars have debated for centuries how this 364-day calendar could be reconciled with the tropical year commonly recognized today. Even so, this fixed calendar provided a framework for the sect's sacred activities and created a stable, predictable rhythm of life, in which every day of the year fell on the same day of the week, year after year. Alongside its astronomical observations, the Book of Enoch also contains a collection of dream visions, with the most famous being the Book of Dream Visions. This section presents an allegorical retelling of Israel's history from the deluge to the arrival of the Messianic kingdom. The visions are filled with symbolism, with figures such as Adam, Noah, and David represented as animals. For example, Noah appears as a white bull, while the various nations and empires that interacted with Israel are shown as different animals, each reflecting their moral or spiritual condition. One of the most remarkable features of the animal apocalypse, as this section is known, is its powerful symbolic language. The white bull represents Adam and his descendants, while other animals such as the black calf or Cain and the red calf or Abel symbolize important biblical figures and their moral choices. Israel's history is told through the allegory of sheep and other animals, with the Lord of the sheep representing God. These symbolic animals exist within a framework of divine judgment, where the sins of the people, represented by the fallen angels, ultimately lead to their punishment. The allegories continue through the turbulent history of Israel, from the Exodus to the Maccabean revolt, capturing the rise and fall of nations and the struggles endured by the Israelites. The vision includes the construction of Solomon's temple, the division of Israel into the northern and southern kingdoms, and the eventual destruction of Jerusalem. Throughout the story, the fate of the Israelites remains connected to their spiritual loyalty or disobedience toward God. The animal apocalypse reaches its climax with a vision of the New Jerusalem, where the righteous are resurrected and the Messiah arrives to bring salvation to the faithful. This eschatological vision offers a hopeful conclusion, where divine justice is finally fulfilled and the righteous receive their reward. At the same time, the book provides a powerful warning about the consequences of abandoning divine law, showing how Israel's repeated cycles of sin and redemption reflect the greater cosmic struggle between good and evil. Another major section of the Book of Enoch, the Epistle of Enoch, brings together prophecy, moral instruction, and a cosmic understanding of righteousness and sin. At the heart of this text is the Apocalypse of Weeks, a historical framework that divides time into 10 symbolic weeks, each representing important events or eras. The final week foretells the judgment and restoration of the world, ending with the creation of a new heaven and the triumph of righteousness. Alongside this prophetic framework, the exhortation section focuses on moral living, emphasizing the importance of righteousness in preparation for the final judgment. The main portion of the epistle contrasts the destinies of the righteous and the wicked. It condemns societal elites, particularly for their oppression of the righteous. The epistle also describes the birth of Noah, presenting him as a divinely chosen figure destined to cleanse the world through the flood. The text ends with a sharp division between light and darkness, representing the eternal separation between the righteous and the wicked. Filled with symbolic names for angels, including fallen figures such as Azazel, the Epistle of Enoch reflects the larger cosmic conflict between good and evil. But how does any of this matter to us today? Or, looking at it from a historical perspective, what do scholars actually say about the Book of Enoch? Until fairly recently, scholars mainly concentrated on decoding the meanings and messages of the text as its earliest audiences would have understood them, especially in connection with the religious, social, and political conditions of that period. Despite being excluded from most canonical scriptures, 1st Enoch has maintained an important theological presence, particularly within the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. In recent years, however, the field of Enochic studies has grown beyond historical and textual analysis, with scholars increasingly examining the Book of Enoch as a way to explore modern theological questions. But perhaps the most shocking detail of all is the mention of the Son of Man in 1st Enoch. The Son of Man is portrayed as a heavenly figure who will come to judge the earth and establish righteousness. This apocalyptic figure has sparked intense scholarly debate, especially over his connection to other messianic figures in Jewish and Christian traditions. The Son of Man in 1 Enoch is often viewed as a precursor to the Christological figure of Jesus in the New Testament. And modern scholars continue to examine how the Enochic concept of the Son of Man influences theological debates about messianism and Christ's role in salvation history. Famous podcaster and internet personality Joe Rogan has shown strong interest in the book's mysterious character and its links to ancient religious and historical narratives. Although he often approaches these discussions with a skeptical or exploratory mindset. For instance, during a podcast episode with Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson, the conversation explored ancient civilizations and mysterious technologies such as the Book of Enoch, connecting them to advanced knowledge that may have existed before modern humanity. Rogan expressed fascination with the possibility that these texts could connect with theories about ancient wisdom and lost technologies. In another discussion, Rogan referred to the Book of Enoch as an example of a text excluded from the Bible, adding another fascinating layer to debates over why some writings were accepted into the canon while others were rejected. But what if things had turned out differently? What if the book had been accepted as part of the Christian canon? If that had happened, Christianity might have developed in radically different ways, both theologically and historically. The text's portrayal of the Son of Man as a heavenly judge could have transformed early Christology, presenting Jesus as an explicitly cosmic figure, central to the final judgment and the restoration of righteousness. Its teachings about angelology, especially the rebellion of the Watchers and their transmission of forbidden knowledge, could have expanded Christian ideas about angels, demons, and the origins of sin, creating a stronger metaphysical focus on spiritual warfare and the cosmic struggle between good and evil. This emphasis could have caused apocalyptic themes to dominate Christian worship, liturgy, and moral teachings, while encouraging a more urgent and mystically charged understanding of salvation. The rejection of First Enoch allowed the Church to develop a more streamlined theology focused on the life and resurrection of Christ. Without its complicated angelology and apocalyptic imagery, Christianity became more centered on individual redemption and a personal relationship with Jesus. The Church's institutional structure placed greater emphasis on unity and doctrinal orthodoxy, reducing alternative theological interpretations. If one Enoch had been included, Christianity might have moved toward a more mystical and fragmented tradition, with greater acceptance of Gnostic and apocalyptic movements. This alternate path could have shaped Christian art, literature, and culture around angelic hierarchies and cosmic conflicts, influencing both historical theology and modern Christian identity in profound and unpredictable ways. Well, that's all for now.